The Johnson family lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever seemed out of place. Their house, a charming two-story home with a neatly trimmed lawn and white picket fence, was the picture of a perfect life. Michael Johnson was a successful businessman, well respected in the community, and his wife Sarah was known for her warmth and kindness. Together they had a beautiful 5-year-old daughter named Emily, a bright and cheerful little girl who adored her parents. To outsiders, their life seemed idyllic, but hidden beneath the surface was a darkness waiting to be uncovered. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah picked up Emily from preschool, expecting the usual chatter about her day. But Emily was unusually quiet, clutching her favorite teddy bear, a worn-out stuffed rabbit she had since she was a baby. Sarah noticed the distant look in her daughter's eyes, as if something was troubling her. She assumed it was just exhaustion from a long day of playing, but when they got home, Emily sat on the living room floor, staring blankly at the television without saying a word. Concerned, Sarah knelt beside her and gently stroked her hair. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" she asked, expecting a response about a minor argument with a friend or a lost crayon. Emily's small fingers tightened around her teddy bear. She hesitated before speaking in a hushed, almost uncertain voice. "Mommy, the lady in the basement won't wake up." Sarah blinked, confused. "What lady, sweetheart?" Emily tilted her head slightly as if trying to remember something important. "The one Daddy keeps down there. She's always sleeping." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The basement? It was always locked, and Emily had never been inside. Michael kept it as a storage space, filled with old boxes and things they rarely used. Sarah felt a creeping sense of unease, but forced a smile. "Oh, honey, there's no lady in the basement. Maybe you had a bad dream." Emily shook her head. "No, she's real. I saw her." The certainty in her daughter's voice unsettled Sarah. It was common for children to have vivid imaginations, to create imaginary friends or strange stories. But something about the way Emily spoke made her stomach twist. She tried to push the thought aside, but as the evening went on, she couldn't stop thinking about it. At dinner, she studied Michael across the table. He was his usual charming self, laughing at something he had seen on the news, completely unaware of the doubt beginning to grow in Sarah's mind. Could Emily's words have meant something? Or was it just a bizarre coincidence? Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house made her flinch. The thought of the locked basement door haunted her. She had never questioned why Michael insisted on keeping it shut. Had she been blind to something all these years? She turned to her husband, who was fast asleep beside her. The doubt in her mind had grown too strong to ignore. Tomorrow she would find the key, and she would see for herself if Emily's words were just a child's fantasy, or something far more terrifying. The next morning, Sarah couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest. Emily's words echoed in her mind, refusing to be dismissed as mere imagination. She went about her usual routine, making breakfast, packing Emily's lunch, and kissing Michael goodbye as he left for work. But a heavy weight lingered over her. Her heart pounded as she stood in the hallway, staring at the basement door. It was always locked. She had never questioned why. Michael had told her years ago that it was just for storage, filled with old furniture, paperwork, and tools. But why would Emily say she saw a woman down there, a sleeping woman who never woke up? It didn't make sense, but Sarah knew she wouldn't find peace until she checked for herself. After dropping Emily off at school, she returned home, her hands trembling as she searched the house for the basement key. She checked the kitchen, drawers, the living room cabinets, and even Michael's nightstand, but there was nothing. Then, in his study, she noticed a small wooden box on his desk. Holding her breath, she opened it, and there it was, a single, rusted key. Her fingers tightened around it as she made her way to the basement door. She hesitated, her pulse hammering in her ears. What was she expecting to find? Dusty boxes, unbroken furniture, or something worse? She inhaled sharply, slid the key into the lock, and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase leading downward. She forced herself to move, to act normal. If he sensed anything unusual, she didn't know what he might do. She took slow, steady breaths and walked into the kitchen, pasting a shaky smile on her face. Michael glanced up and gave her his usual, warm smile, completely unaware that his entire world was on the verge of unraveling. "How was your day?" he asked, opening the refrigerator. Sarah swallowed hard. "Good. Just ran some errands," she replied, forcing her voice to sound even. She needed to get to Emily. She needed to get out of this house. Michael poured himself a glass of water, oblivious to the panic clawing at Sarah's chest. She made her way to Emily's room, her mind racing. Could she call the police without Michael hearing? Would they believe her? She needed proof, more than just the body in the freezer. She needed to know who Lisa Montgomery was and what had happened to her. Sarah grabbed her phone and stepped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. With shaking fingers, she typed Lisa Montgomery missing person into the search bar. Dozens of articles popped up instantly. Sarah's stomach clenched as she read. Lisa Montgomery had vanished 5 years ago. She had been reported missing by her family after failing to show up for work. Friends described her as kind, responsible, and happy, until she had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Sarah scrolled through the reports, her heart hammering. Lisa had been in a relationship with a man before she went missing. A man she had met at work, a man named Michael Johnson. Sarah nearly dropped her phone. The world tilted around her as she realized the horrifying truth. Michael had been with Lisa before he had been with her. And then, right before Sarah and Michael had started dating, Lisa had vanished. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. Had Lisa tried to leave him? Had she threatened to expose something about him? And then another, even more chilling thought struck her. Emily. Sarah covered her mouth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Lisa had gone missing 5 years ago. Emily was 5 years old. Her hands tightened around the phone as she whispered the unthinkable to herself. Was Emily really her daughter? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through her. Was it possible that Michael had taken Emily from Lisa and raised her as their own? Had he staged the entire pregnancy, making Sarah believe Emily was hers? The sound of footsteps outside the bathroom made her freeze. "Sarah?" Michael's voice was calm, but something about it sent a shiver down her spine. "You okay in there?" Sarah swallowed her panic. She had no time left. She had to get Emily and run. Sarah's mind raced as she stood frozen in the bathroom, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Michael was right outside the door. She could hear the slight edge in his voice, the way he lingered just a little too long. He knew something was wrong. She forced herself to breathe. If she panicked now, she wouldn't make it out. She had to act normal, just for a little longer. "Yeah," she called back, making sure her voice didn't shake. "Just feeling a little sick." "I'll be out in a minute." There was a brief pause. Then Michael's footsteps moved away. She let out a shaky breath, but she knew she didn't have much time. He was already suspicious. If he had kept a body, hidden in their basement for years, there was no telling what he would do if he found out she knew. She unlocked the door and stepped out, moving as calmly as she could. She had to get to Emily. If Emily wasn't biologically hers, if she had been stolen from Lisa Montgomery, Sarah needed to protect her more than ever. Emily was playing quietly in her room, humming softly to herself as she arranged her stuffed animals in a neat row. Sarah's heart ached at the sight of her, so small, so innocent. She had no idea the truth that had just unraveled. The air was thick with dust and something else, a faint, unpleasant smell she couldn't quite place. Flipping the light switch, a dim bulb flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She took a cautious step forward, her bare feet pressing against the cold cement floor. Old chairs, boxes, and forgotten holiday decorations were stacked against the walls. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first glance. Then in the far corner she saw it, a large locked freezer. Her breath hitched. It looked old, the kind of heavy-duty freezer meant for storing meat. But why was it locked? Her hands trembled as she stepped closer. The smell was stronger now, a sickly, rotting odor that made her stomach twist. She grabbed the handle and yanked, but it wouldn't budge. Frantically, she looked around until she spotted a screwdriver on a nearby shelf. With shaking hands, she wedged it into the lock, prying it open with a desperate force. The moment the lid gave way, the smell hit her like a punch to the gut. Gagging, she stumbled back, but her eyes remained fixed on the horror inside. Wrapped, in layers of plastic frozen stiff, was a human body, a woman. Her face was obscured, her skin pale with a bluish tint. Sarah's mind went blank. The air around her felt too thick, the walls of the basement suddenly too close. She had found the woman Emily spoke of. But she wasn't sleeping. She was dead. Sarah stumbled back, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The stench of decay clung to the air, thick and suffocating. She gripped the edge of a nearby shelf to steady herself, her legs trembling beneath her. Her mind refused to process what she had just seen. A body. A real, human body. Frozen, lifeless, hidden in her own home. For a moment, she could do nothing but stare at the horrifying sight. The woman's pale limbs were stiff, her face partially obscured by the layers of plastic wrapped around her. Who was she? How long had she been there? And most disturbingly, why had Michael hidden her? Sarah's stomach twisted violently. She staggered away from the freezer, choking back the bile rising in her throat. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to run, to get as far away as possible. But she needed answers. She needed to understand how this nightmare had existed right under her nose. Her gaze darted around the basement, searching for anything that could tell her who this woman was. A small wooden cabinet stood against the far wall. Moving with a mix of fear and urgency, she pulled the drawers open one by one. Most were filled with junk, old papers, rusty tools, a tangled mess of electrical cords. But then, in the bottom drawer, she found something that made her blood run cold, an old leather wallet. She picked it up with trembling fingers and flipped it open. Inside was an identification card. The name printed on it was Lisa Montgomery. The face staring back at her was that of a young woman, her eyes bright, her smile warm and full of life. But that woman was now lying frozen in her basement. Sarah's mind raced. The name didn't sound familiar, but a sickening realization began to form. Whoever Lisa was, Michael had known her. He had kept her hidden all these years. And Emily, oh God, Emily. The innocent words of her 5-year-old had led to this discovery. If not for her, Sarah might never have known. A sharp noise from upstairs made her freeze. The sound of the front door closing. Her heart nearly stopped. Michael. He was home. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she clutched the wallet to her chest. If he found her down here, if he realized what she had uncovered, what would he do? She had never feared her husband before, but now she saw him in an entirely different light. A man who had been living a normal life, smiling, laughing, playing with his daughter, while a corpse lay hidden beneath their feet. Moving quickly but silently, Sarah shut the drawer and backed away from the freezer. She had to get out of there before Michael realized anything was wrong. She forced herself to steady her breathing, willing her shaking legs to move. As quietly as possible, she slipped back up the stairs, locking the basement door behind her. She had to act fast. The man she had shared her life with was not who she thought he was. And now, she knew too much. Sarah's hands trembled as she locked the basement door behind her. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, making it hard to think. Michael was home. She could hear him in the kitchen, setting his keys on the counter, humming softly to himself. It was the same familiar routine he had followed for years, but now every small action sent waves of terror through her. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "Want to go for a little trip with Mommy?" Emily looked up, her eyes bright. "Where?" Sarah forced a smile. "Somewhere fun." She grabbed Emily's coat and slipped it over her tiny arms, her hands shaking as she buttoned it up. Every second felt agonizingly slow. She could hear Michael moving around downstairs. If she wasn't careful, he would see them leaving. She lifted Emily into her arms, holding her close as she made her way toward the front door. Just a few more steps and they would be out. But as she reached for the doorknob, a voice stopped her cold. "Going somewhere?" Michael stood in the hallway watching her. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Something dark, calculating. He knew. Sarah's mind screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I just thought I'd take Emily out for some fresh air." Michael took a slow step forward. "That's funny," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Because you look like you're running." Sarah's heart pounded. She had one chance. Holding Emily tightly, she yanked the door open and bolted. She heard Michael curse behind her, his footsteps pounding against the floor. She didn't look back. She sprinted toward the car, fumbling for her keys. Just as she got the door open and shoved Emily inside, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. "Sarah," Michael hissed. "Let's go inside." With every ounce of strength she had, she yanked free and slammed the car door shut. She locked it just as Michael pounded on the window. Shaking, she started the car and sped away. She didn't stop until she reached the police station. By the time the police raided the house, Michael was gone. But the evidence he left behind was enough. The body, the DNA tests, the truth. Lisa Montgomery had been held captive until she gave birth. Michael had stolen Emily, killed Lisa, and buried the secret until his own daughter uncovered the truth. Sarah was granted full custody of Emily. Michael was eventually caught, sentenced to life in prison, and all of it started with a 5-year-old's innocent words.